Thank you for this kind introduction, and also I'd like to thank the scientific committee for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity to come back to Ash-Sharqiyya, where I studied medicine, and to have the chance to reunion with some old friends. I have to warn you that my presentation is not as interesting as Mut'ab's one, so please bear with me. And thank you for staying late this Thursday afternoon. I have nothing to disclose, and on this talk, I hopefully will be able to describe a challenge case and how we approach the diagnosis, discuss the condition, and identify some unclear aspects. And this is my reference. So let's start with the history. That a girl that I met when she was 13 years old. At that time, that was 2019. She came with fever for 2 weeks, sore throat, loose motion, intermittent abdominal pain, and recurrent oral ulcers. Her back history, actually, or her past medical history was almost similar. She presented at the age of 4 years with fever for 3 months, rash, hepatosplenomegaly, and no arthritis. Her parents are consanguineous, and there is no family history of any autoimmune or rheumatological condition. At that time, when she was 4 years old, her investigation, she was admitted to the hospital and fully investigated, found to have low white count, high inflammatory markers, malignancy were ruled out with normal bone marrow, and she was given a working diagnosis of systemic onset GIA and was started on steroid and methotrexate. She improved dramatically. However, she developed diplopia, and the father thought that could be related to methotrexate, and it was stopped. And actually, she continued to do well. However, persistent leukopenia, recurrent otitis media, and UTIs, and recurrent oral ulcers. This time when she presented with oral and genital ulcers, and if you can see, it's very nasty ulcers, not only in the labia majora, it's also perianal, discharging nasty ulcers. She also had a macular rash, hepatosplenomegaly, no arthritis or lymphadenopathy. So we listed the differential diagnosis, which I'm sure you agree with some and not with others. Systemic onset GIA, we gave her possible Behçet, IBD, lupus, cyclic neutropenia, vasculitis, and ALPS. Her workup showed severe leukopenia and ANC of 0, hemoglobin 95, platelets 176, peripheral smear was negative, high ESR and CRP, ferritin 270, mild deranged coagulation, normal complement, lymphocyte subset showed reduced natural killer cells, B cells and T cells, low immunoglobulins, ANA and ANCA were negative, DAT was negative, and HLA-B 51 was negative. Infectious and cultures were negative, and she had high fecal calprotectin of 1,000. Abdominal ultrasound showed hepatosplenomegaly, renal stone as well. We consulted GI team who requested for MRI, and it showed segmental thickening of the wall of the sigmoid, keeping with colitis, and therefore she went under upper and lower GI scope, which showed again colitis. Eye exam, echo normal, and interestingly, she had left sensory neuro hearing loss. So in summary, 13 years old girl with a second episode of prolonged fever, recurrent oral and genital ulcers, persistent lower white count, macular rash, hepatosplenomegaly and colitis, sensory neurohearing loss, leukopenia, high inflammatory marker, low immunoglobulin levels, and negative autoantibodies. So let's go back to our differential diagnosis. Systemic onset GIA is still on the table. However, it wouldn't explain the absence of the arthritis and the genital ulcers. Behçet as well is there, but not explaining the hepatosplenomegaly, IBD, but again, hepatosplenomegaly and low white count will not be explained. Lupus, always there, but her antibodies were negative. If it's cyclic neutropenia, why she would have hepatosplenomegaly? Always think of vasculitis, but she wasn't typical for small vessels vasculitis. And ALPS also could be a differential, but that wouldn't explain the hepatosplenomegaly and why she would have low immunoglobulins. So when you always struggle, we just send genetic testing, and we do have in my institute like a panel genetic testing that includes almost 360, 100 gene of immune dysregulation, primary immunodeficiency, and autoinflammatory panels. And she turned to be having homozygous mutation of AD2, and the parents were heterozygous. And to confirm that, we sent for the level, and it came back low, supporting the diagnosis of DADA2. I know, Dr. Adil, you know the patient because she came to you for a second opinion, but you are going to listen to the interesting part now. So DADA2 is, as you know, autosomal recessive disease caused by loss function mutation AD2 gene that's located in chromosome 22q. It was first published by two separated groups back in 2014, where they found the mutation in polyarthritis nodosa group that developed recurrent stroke. It's an early childhood disease. However, now adult onset is a very known entity. And since 2014, there's more than 100 mutations, ranging from missense, deletion, nonsense, and splicing mutations. Now, the proposed pathophysiology of DADA2 is basically that, as you know, AD2 enzyme secreted by myeloid cells. And when you have deficiency in the enzyme, this will lead to diminution of the reduction in the diminution of adenosine to deoxyadenosine. And this will lead to extracellular accumulation of adenosine. That will lead to dysregulation of mitosis, chronic neutrophilic activation, and also macrophage polarization from M2 to a pro-inflammatory subtype M1. And that will lead to cytokine storm by releasing interferon, TNF-alpha, also reported IL-6, IL-10, IL-8, as well as the dysregulation of mitosis will lead to altered endothelial cell injury and increased naive B cells and decreased the mature B cells. So is there a correlation between genotype and phenotype? And this is what Cesar Oz and her group actually proved, that the dimerization mutation is correlated more with vasculitic phenotype. However, the catalytic mutation associated more with hematological manifestation. Also, Pui and his group looked at the same thing, but he focused more in the enzyme level. And what he found is missense mutation correlates more with vasculitic phenotype, and there's usually a remnant of the enzyme activity, compared to a patient with hematological manifestation who usually have nonsense deletion mutation, and usually they have complete abscess or minimum enzymatic activity. It's also important to know that the level of enzyme correlate with the phenotype, so undetectable enzymes will give you the severe phenotype. And very interesting to know that there is a phenotypic variation even among the same family, and that's why it's very important to screen the family. And the reason behind that, they proposed that epigenetic and the environmental factor could play a role here in different phenotype despite having the same mutation. How do they present? They present with vasculitic presentation, autoimmunity, immunodeficiency, hematological manifestations. However, asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic individuals have been reported. And again, here's come the importance of family screening. And in one interesting paper, they mentioned that almost up to 70% of DADA2 patients presented with musculoskeletal manifestation, they don't have any evidence of vasculitis, and that's why you have to broaden your differential diagnosis. So when they compare polyarthritis nodosa with DADA2 usually a younger group, more skin CNS, bone marrow defection, and humoral immunodeficiencies. And if you look deep on the clinical manifestation, as we mentioned, they have high inflammatory markers, fever, constitutional symptom, skin involvement more than 75%, and the commonest is livedo reticularis. However, other manifestations like cutaneous ulcer, digital ulcers, erythema nodosum also have been reported. Skin biopsy showed you vasculitis, basically. And very interestingly as well to know that few patients with DADA2 presented only with the skin manifestation. And again, that's push you to broaden your differential diagnosis and include always DADA2 in your differential. Up to 77 neurological manifestation, the commonest is ischemic stroke. However, other neurological manifestation like cranial nerve palsy, seizure, sensory neurohearing loss also have been reported. The vasculitis also can affect the GI, and they may present with GI manifestation, abdominal pain, bowel perforation, high liver enzymes. They also present like a common variable immunodeficiency, like inflammatory bowel disease, and also renal involvement is common. Regarding the immunodeficiency, usually they have a milder form of immunodeficiency, and the commonest is low IgM. However, decreased B cells, hypogammaglobulinemia, and impaired antibody response to vaccine, in addition to low natural killer cells, T cells, also have reported. They also may have lymphoproliferative manifestation, like hepatosplenomegaly, generalized lymphadenopathy that may mimic even ALPS syndrome. They have recurrent oral ulcer, genital ulcers, and again, few patients with DADA2 may present like a Behçet disease, so again, include DADA2 presentation, DADA2 differential in your Behçet cohort. And though it's very rare to have antibodies, but also it's been reported that they may have positive ANA, double-strand DNA, and ANCA. Hematological, they have cytopenia, Diamond-Blackfan anemia, and Coombs positive hemolytic and thrombocytopenia. This is one of the largest cohort looking at the clinical feature systemic literature review. They looked at 90 publications, including 378 patients. And interestingly, they reported that cutaneous manifestation, hematological manifestation, recurrence fever, and neurological manifestation are the top for presentation or presented symptoms. Now, if you look at the enzyme activity, it's very important, the enzyme activity, or it's crucial for the diagnosis, but not for follow-up. And as mentioned earlier, it correlates with the phenotype. And again, very interestingly to know that heterozygous patients, they also may have a lower level enzyme activity compared to healthy control. Again, this is from the same paper of Cesar Ozen, where she looked at the enzymatic activity in DADA2 patients with polyarteritis nodosa and Diamond-Blackfan anemia presentation, and she compared it with the pure Diamond-Blackfan anemia and polyarteritis nodosa without DADA mutation. And what they concluded that both group with DADA2 either presented with vasculitis or blood manifestation, they have the same lower enzyme activity. And that's lower than the carrier patient, and even the carrier lower than her healthy control and her polyarteritis nodosa and Diamond-Blackfan anemia without DADA2 mutation. This is the same result, but from the Dutch cohort, where they found, again, there is no difference in the enzyme level between hematological manifestation and vasculitis. However, if you see it roughly, you may find that the vasculitic type might have a little bit of enzyme activity, but it wasn't clinically significant. This is just to summarize last 4 slides, that the conclusion that if you looked at the phenotype of vasculitis associated more with the residual activity and more with missense mutation. However, the hematological manifestation more common with frame shift, deletion, insertion, mutation, and they have almost 0 enzyme activity. This is first to diagnose the DADA2, you need enzyme activity and genetic testing. And this is one of the recent published international consensus statements where they talked about management and evaluation of DADA2. And as you know, it's a consensus, and they agreed on the level of agreement and level of experience. And they agreed that to diagnose DADA2, you need a genetic testing and enzyme activity. Also, they agreed that normal enzyme activity almost ruling out DADA2. Now, regarding treatment, as you know, we lack, unfortunately, randomized clinical trial, but treatment with anti-TNF has significant lower risk of stroke, and all type of TNF blockade, either receptor or monoclonal, worked beautifully in those group. Not necessary, but if they worked well. And the use of steroid, IL-1, IL-6 inhibition help in control inflammation, but unfortunately not prevent the stroke. And that's why you have to be very careful if you're treating those patients with these medication. Unfortunately, it's lifelong medication. And the use of anticoagulant, antithrombotic is controversial because the potential of brain hemorrhage. And the allogenic stem cell transplantation is a curative option for patients with severe hematological manifestation, severe immunodeficiency, and refractory cytopenia. IVIG wouldn't help with the inflammation part, but definitely will help as a prophylactic for infection. And treating pre-symptomatic individual with DADA2 is a really subject of debate because people think that the first presentation could be a fatal presentation, which is basically a stroke. The outcome not always good because there is a considerable morbidity and mortality in DADA2. Up to 8% individual die before the age of 30. And the reason of mortality, basically recurrent stroke, bowel ischemia, severe infection, severe hematological manifestation. So back to our girl. So after knowing the diagnosis, we have done for her brain MRI, which showed a single left ventricular thalamic-glottic cavity, which may indicate previous stroke, and that may explain the diplopia that she had at that time. And just to complete the workup, we sent antiphospholipid syndrome workup, which came back negative. So now it's much easier to go back and see what features she had. She had almost all the features, including fever, rash, hepatosplenomegaly, the stroke, recurrent otitis media, hearing loss, leukopenia, high inflammatory marker, abnormal immunological tests, in addition to genetic testing and low activity. So we started her on steroid. We gave her already IVIG at the beginning because we were not sure what she has. She was convinced by Dr. Adel to be on adalimumab, and then she switched to etanercept. On colchicine, did very well, reached age of 18, and I transferred her to adults. Now, whilst I was enjoying transferring her to adult, her sister presented with history of 2 months of duration, and she was 7 years old, sore throat, abdominal pain, and generalized body ache. She had some cervical lymph node, faint macular rash over upper and lower extremities, no hepatosplenomegaly, however, active arthritis, both shoulder, elbow, wrist, and knee. Her white count was normal, hemoglobin of 11, platelets normal, no blast cell, ferritin 110, high inflammatory marker. Interestingly, high antistreptolysin O titer, ANA and RF were negative, virology infectious workup negative, except Procella IgM was positive, but PCR was negative. Her immunoglobulins were sky high, lymphocyte subset normal, and she had negative HLA-B27 and B51. Abdominal ultrasound showed multiple mesenteric lymph nodes, echo was normal, and eye exam was normal. So by asking the audience to raise your hand, how many of you believe that this last sister or the last patient I present has another condition? So, okay. So at least it wasn't me only. So I thought, yeah, she may have similar to her sister, and I sent it targeted Saginar sequencing with enzyme level activity. While I'm waiting for the result, her white count stayed the same, but her platelets were trending up, her inflammatory markers were sky high, and I got the genetic testing that she is a carrier or heterozygous of DADA2. So the question, can a carrier be symptomatic? So some carrier pathogenic variant of DADA2 mutation with AD2 activity levels in the carrier range, they may have late onset or mild symptoms. But however, all reported is usually mild symptoms, and the majority of the carrier, they are healthy control like her parents. So that wasn't convinced me that she's only carrier. However, another way of thinking that mutation-negative patient with a clinical and enzymatic phenotype consistent with DADA2, they may suggest the mutation in the what they call it, non-coding or introgenic region that we missed from the Sanger sequencing or whole exome sequencing. So I said maybe we need to do whole genome sequencing and look for other mutations of DADA2, not in the regular mutation place. And I sent for whole genome sequencing. I was still waiting for enzyme level. While we were waiting, I started her on steroids. She improved clinically and laboratorily. And while we were weaning of steroids, she again flared with arthritis and high CRP. So because I still believe that she may have a diagnosis similar to her sister, I started on anti-TNF, but there was no improvement on anti-TNF. And then the enzyme level activity came even in the carrier state, so that wouldn't explain, honestly, her manifestation. So here, things became more complicated. I didn't know what to do. And then I got the whole genome sequencing. It did not show other variant of DADA2. However, it showed homozygous and missense mutation of LAC1 mutation. I don't think I will teach you LAC1 because you have the expert team of LAC1, and the majority of interesting paper came from Saudi Arabia. But it was a good opportunity for me and read about LAC1, which is a homozygous loss of expression mutation in LAC1 associated with early onset arthritis. It's primarily expressed in macrophage upon mTOR signaling, which is the inflammation pathway. And they have not only a risk of systemic onset GIA, also risk of Crohn's, psoriasis, and ankylosing spondylitis. And that's the paper I talked about, too, from Saudi Arabia by Dr. Sulaiman Mayouf and his group and the other. And then subsequently, other papers came from India, Turkey, and other regions. But basically, it's an early age onset disease that associated with chronic course, higher incidence in women, family clustering, high inflammatory markers, few antibodies, and diverse phenotype. But we ended up a few questions that I think that need to be answered first. Can the symptom of the last patient explained by LAC1? And I think to answer that question, we need more functional study. And I'm lucky to have a group of research team that I worked with, and we are currently doing some functional study. Basically, we look at the protein expression in the macrophage, antibodies for assisting PS6, which is upregulated usually in LAC1 and autophagy flux, which unfortunately I don't have the result yet. And that may help us to actually have an idea if that mutation is really causing her symptoms. The other question, does her first sister has LAC1? And that's why I just brought the other sister to do the targeted Sanger sequencing, sorry, but I don't have the result yet. And the most important question is how common to have two monogenic autoinflammatory disease in one family. So in summary, sorry for the typo, it's DADA2, not DADA22. In an autosomal recessive disease caused by a loss-function mutation of AD2 gene, clinical presentation heterogeneous from vasculitis to immunodeficiency, genetic testing and low enzymes are crucial for the diagnosis. Anti-TNF showed significantly lowering the risk of stroke. And some carrier may have symptoms, however, it's mild symptom and late onset of manifestation. I also quickly talked about LAC1 homozygous mutation, which is a loss of expression associated with early onset arthritis. And I will end it up with the same title that I use for this presentation, that numerous aspects of autoinflammatory syndrome remain unclear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Buthaina, for this interesting cases. Also, Dr. Mutaiba. Any questions?
يعطيكم العافية دكتورة بثينة ودكتورة متعبة. My questions to دكتورة متعبة. Actually, I have one question and one comment. For your patient, did you consider to do genetic? Because if Dr. Al-Mayouf allowed me to mention one of the patients, I had the privilege to involve in this patient during my fellowship. This patient presented with very early onset IBD. Then with a total proctocolectomy, he was treated with multiple anti-TNF inhibitors. Then he was referred to King Faisal Specialist Hospital with massive large vessel vasculitis. And this patient turned to be a FOXP3 mutation. And this patient led us to think about the genetic background in patient with large vessel vasculitis, and we had a total of 7 patients with genetic background and large vessel vasculitis. The majority of patients had similar presentation to your patient, the high inflammatory marker, high blood pressure, valvular disease. So this is the question. For the comment, there is a lot of study regarding Takayasu arthritis and genetic backgrounds. Majority of these patients are on Chinese population. They did the whole genome study on this type of patient, and they found a lot of HLA and non-HLA genetic backgrounds in these patients. One of the SNP that I can remember is not a gene, which are very associated with large vessel vasculitis and IBD. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Afia. Yes, regarding the genetic testing, yes, we send west because of the significant family history. And we also asked ourselves how common you have 2 autoimmune disorders in the same patient, but yeah, it came to be negative. A lot of papers said that the large vessel vasculitis could be the extra GI manifestations of IBD and vice versa. So it's kind of meningeal بيضة ولا دجاجة. It's those 2 diseases are like this, but in the literature, actually the pre-existing usually is the IBD, as you mentioned, and then 3 years later, most of the cases they found to have Takayasu arthritis. Yeah, thank you.
We have room for one more question for Dr.
Just a comment. Thank you, Dr. Mutaiba, Dr. Buthaina. Very interesting, challenging cases. Just to concur with the findings of Dr. Mutaiba, that fatigue and myalgia can be really very alarming and for young children. 3 years back, we had a case of Takayasu that her presentation only were myalgia and fatigability. it was severe enough for the mother to take her to the clinic, and at that time, the physician was smart enough to put a stethoscope and listen to her heart, found her galloping, and then he shifted her to the emergency, big heart, so she was in heart failure, unnoticed. And then the cascade of the story started, and she ended up to have a stage 5 of TKS, so non-operable, non-treatable. She's on treatment, and my advice for Dr. Mitaiba, if she has no response on tocilizumab, which is now the only positive data came from the Chinese study, I would advise to go back to the infliximab or anti-TNF and support this with the methotrexate. Because the long-standing inflammation, you know, might end up with a disease progression, unfortunately.
Thank you, Dr. Wafa. Dr. Mitaiba.